Do I think churches should be more accepting of gay marriage? Sure. I don't think churches will be obsolete in 100 years. If they're not already, I don't think they ever will be. People were having problems with religion fucking the days of fucking Aristotle, and probably even earlier than that. What makes you think that religion will be gone in the next 100 years if it's already been around for thousands when people have already been complaining about it? Like, the progress in the last 20 so years on things like gay marriage, etc., are pretty extreme compared to previous problems. People, not really. Moving from being against gay marriage to gay marriage is a lot less extreme than from like going from burning witches to not burning witches, I think. Which happened as long ago as, or as recent. How long ago did we stop burning witches? Did we do that in like the New World when we came to America? In like the 1700s or whatever? Were we burning witches still? I don't actually know. So I mean, we went from burning witches to not burning witches, and we still have religion, so. Don't you think education makes a huge difference with your view on religion? I think that most people are pretty dumb. I think even a lot of educated people can be kind of dumb. I don't think that, I mean, religion isn't even like the biggest issue. Like, in and of itself, I don't think being religious is necessarily a bad thing, but there are a lot of other things that people are like really fucking stupid about. Things like, I don't know, I hate everything that has to do with politics. Destiny, I'm not really into watching beheadings, but why does the victim actually getting beheaded actually scream when they get beheaded? Why do they or why don't they? I think maybe you're saying why don't they? I don't think I've ever seen a beheading video where the guy is actually screaming when he's getting beheaded. I imagine that they probably don't feel very much pain when the actual beheading is happening, because there's got to be like a fuck ton of adrenaline going through their body like as it's going on. That would be my guess, but I mean, the beheadings usually take like a long fucking time. Like, it's usually really fucked up. Like, it's not like it's very rare that what just got linked here was the first time I've ever seen somebody's head go off in like one clean sweep. Usually there's like a lot of chopping to get that shit fucking off. It's pretty fucked up. Do I set the alarm on my phone when I take a nap? Sometimes, but sometimes I just turn it off and then sleep through it. So I don't know. Your brain doesn't die instantly? I think I've read some scientific sources that say that it's possible that you might have like a second or two at the most of consciousness after you get beheaded, but for the people that think that like you can turn your eyes and shit for like 15 seconds after, that's not true. It's like, I think it's like a second or two at the most from what I've read. Yeah, King of Sway, that doesn't happen. They start at the back of the neck, so they sever the spinal cord instantly. That never happens in any of the beheading videos that I've seen. It's very, very rare. It's a hard thing to get through. In fact, there's a lot of beheading videos where they actually cut the video and then they just show you where they throw the guy's head on. I think that's what happened in the Nick Berger video, where the guy starts cutting and then you see him gargling and shit and his head bends back all fucking weird and everything because he's obviously fucking dead. And then like the video will cut, and then at the end it'll show them, because they have to cut because they couldn't actually cut through the spinal cord with a knife. It's very, very hard to get through, at least from what I've seen. It's very hard to actually cut through somebody's spine. Like, I think they stopped because it was disgusting. I don't think it's disgusting to them. I think they think that they're doing the right thing, so it's really easy for them. I feel uncomfortable talking about this shit. I mean, it's pretty uncomfortable, but I mean, it's really interesting seeing, I don't know, seeing what people are capable of doing when they're like in a group and shit. Oh man, I don't even know, the group, I always thought that the group killings are like the worst. I don't remember, I never remember like the specific, like what the video was about, but you guys, other people said they've seen this. What's the video where, I want to say they were Russians and they had like 20 people lying down in a row and the guy just like walks down the row and like lifts their head and cuts their throats, and then like the one guy tries to get up and run at the end and he makes it like all the way to the background and then the guy like hacks his fucking head off. Holy shit. But yeah, no, but like it's weird to see like a whole bunch of people just standing around like all nonchalantly and shit while people are just like getting executed. It's really fucked up. It actually is like really fucked up. I don't know. Why do victims not try to fight back before being beheaded or react? I don't know. Maybe it might be like, I've never been in a situation, I can't even like pretend to say I've ever been in a situation like that before. Maybe you accept death at that point because you've seen so much of it. But I don't know, like literally like everybody in all the group execution videos I've seen, they're just all like just sitting there and they're just like waiting for the people to move down the line and kill them. Yeah, maybe that's it too. They want to be killed quickly rather than being like tortured or whatever for running. I don't know. The stoning videos are actually like really fucking bad. I always used to think of stoning as like kind of a joke. Like I don't know, like I just like, oh, whatever, like people throw rocks at you and you die. But I don't know, the videos that I've seen are typically what they do is they'll take the woman or maybe the guy. I don't think I've ever seen a guy being stoned to death before, but like they put them in like a white sheet and then they bury them up to like their hips or whatever, like in the dirt or sand, and then everybody throws rocks at them and you see like the sheet start to turn red. Oh my god, that's fucked up too. Oh, I don't even know, dude. There's like there's so much fucked up shit. People do really fucked up shit. When they're in large groups of people, they do really fucked up shit. I don't know. It's pretty messed up. Would you do anything if you were in a public scenario and you saw that happening? Like, what would you even do? I don't even know. I mean, I don't necessarily fault any of the bystanders either, because what, if you speak up, won't you just get killed too? Like, I don't know. It's pack mentality? Yeah, a little bit. Yeah, fiddle me diddle. I know. There's like, there's such, this is such an old experiment. We're watching this. This is really interesting. Everybody should know about this. Everybody should know about this. If anybody's taking a high school psych class, it's so weird because you always grow up. It's easy because when you grow up, you always learn about like right and wrong, and there are good guys and bad guys. You know, like when World War II, you know, Hitler was the bad guy and the Nazis and all those people were bad guys and shit. But then like you see like, I don't know, like psychology experiments. Every psychology experiment that's ever released just shows that people like just tend to be really shitty in group scenarios, and then like people are usually really weak and easily manipulated. This is a really interesting experiment. I don't even know if experiments like this are legal to do anymore. I could be wrong. This video is dated 2009, so maybe it's not. I thought there was a big debate on whether or not, because like the Stanley prison experiment, I don't think that you're allowed to do that anymore. Like I don't think like the ethics, the board of ethics or whatever bullshit, I don't think they let you do experiments like this anymore. I might be wrong though, I'm not sure.
To find out, Michael is about to observe the replication of one of the most controversial experiments in history. In 1961, social psychologist Stanley Milgram devised a test to see if ordinary law-abiding people would give a stranger a lethal electric shock in the name of science.
Oh, Stanford prison experiment, not Stanley, I'm sorry.
12 members of the public arrive for what they think is a memory test. They're introduced to another person who they believe is another volunteer.
I'm Nick.
He's really an actor.
I'm Professor Lawrence.
As is the professor who'll be running the test.
Do you know what we're doing today?
Not specifically.
The volunteers are also unaware that they're being filmed. Social psychologist Dr. Clifford Stott will be monitoring their responses.
We're conducting an experiment into learning and behaviour.
The actor who's acting as the professor comes in and talks to the two participants to try and convince them that what's actually happening is this scientific study of memory rather than actually what it is, which is a scientific study of obedience to authority.
Yeah, what somebody in chat said, if they aren't told what happens in the experiment, then they can't run the experiment. I think it's illegal to do this psych test anymore. I don't think that it's allowed.
The professor reveals that the experiment will involve a form of punishment.
The punishment we've chosen to use is electric shock. It's right. Negative reinforcement.
Each participant is given a specific role within the experiment.
So I'm asking one of you to be a teacher and one of you to be a learner.
The learner receives the shocks. The teacher applies them.
Now, how do they decide who's the victim and who's the teacher?
Well, that's done through a lottery, so they draw lots.
And how does that work out? Teacher?
Of course, it's fixed, so the actual participant always ends up being the teacher.
So you must be teacher.
Okay.
The subject observes the learner being strapped to the electric shock device.
Teacher, as he's called, gets to see all this. He gets to see that the man is restrained, can't move in the chair.
And I think this is where the procedure starts to get really interesting, because it's now the teacher begins to realise the potential consequences of what's going on.
Now, how will I know how much pain he's feeling? Sorry, Nick.
Well, you won't. That's not really the point of the exercise. The point of the exercise is to see how he learns. So this is the shock generator.
The teacher is then taken next door and shown the generator,
I'd like to sit down there and just make yourself comfortable.
which goes from 15 all the way up to a lethal 450 volts. That's almost twice the mains voltage in the UK.
So you read those things.
The teachers are given a list of word pairs, which the learner is expected to memorize. Each time the learner gets a multiple choice question wrong, the teacher is told to increase the voltage of the shock.
And then just do that.
I'm going to give you a little shock so you can see what it feels like.
To reinforce the subject's belief that the generator is real,
And
they are given a 45-volt shock.
I'm scared.
don't get scared, all right? Here goes.
Okay, yeah.
Significant? Yeah.
Yeah, fairly.
Okay.
Not enough to kill me just yet, so that's okay.
When the procedure continues, there's an awareness clearly in the mind of the teacher that there is a potential for the victim to actually be experiencing quite high levels of pain.
Yellow flour, strong coffee.
The point of Milgram's experiment is to see if the teachers will call a stop to the test, or obey the professor and inflict extremely painful shocks, in belief that they're advancing science.
Please continue.
That was correct. Fast. Is it A, train, B, car, C, aeroplane, D, journey? Sorry, it's 195. If that's him shouting, I can't go on. Sorry.
Well, the thing is that the shocks do involve pain, but the experiment requires that you continue, so...
The teacher here is like really specific on the verbiage. It's another thing that makes this experiment so interesting. I think if this is the same when I watch, it's like every time he talks, it's always like the experiment requires you to go on. Well, for the test to be finished, it requires you to carry on. Like in order for this to work, it's required that you continue.
Please go on.
There is no permanent tissue damage, that's the important.
Sorry?
There is no permanent tissue damage.
I know, but I really don't want to. I don't want to give pain like this.
Please just continue.
Okay, Nick. If you're happy to continue, we'll carry on. No, I'm not. I can't go on. I can't go on. Sorry, I'm going to have to give it up because I'm not going to do this.
I fully understand the
Experiment requires that you go on.
It's also crazy because a lot of people voice objection, but it's like an absurdly, it's like it was like 85% plus people were capable of, or 85%, it was an absurdly high percentage of people would be pushed to deliver the final shock in the experiment, even though like there was also a high number, like 70% of people like voiced their objection to it. Like almost all of them were able to be pushed to deliver the final shock.
Sorry, Nick, that was wrong. It's 225 volts. I'm going to press it quickly. If you don't want to go on, you don't have to press the next button.
Let me out! My heart's starting to bother me now.
Right, okay, that's it. That's it. I can hear him. I can't go on.
Are you terminated?
Yes.
Blue cheese fancy.
Oh god, I hate blue cheese. It's fucking... This was the worst smelling shit in the entire kitchen in the back. The blue cheese shit smelled worse than anything else. Oh god, I hated it.
Just the right amount of fancy.
Do they know the final shock is lethal? So that's part of the experiment. You figure that the final shock is lethal, like you know it inside like your heart or your head, but the teacher or the professor will always tell you that it's okay, right? But that's part of the experiment, right? Because that's supposed to emulate like real life, where like a person might think like, am I doing something bad? Like I might be, but this figure of authority is telling me that it's okay, so I have to press on, right? That's the whole point. So like in this experiment, even though they're probably starting to think inside like, wow, this final shock, like this might be lethal, like the guy's complaining a lot, with the researcher egging them on, they still managed to get to that point, you know?
What the participants don't know is that the learner hasn't been receiving any shocks at all.
Let me out! Let me out of here! Let me out!
His responses are being played on a pre-recorded CD.
Stop! Let me out of here! Let me out of here! Let me out!
When I get to intense shock, and then extreme intensity shock, and then dangerous severe shock, I need to stop, really, don't I?
Well, the experiment...
They're never, ever explicitly told that it's lethal. No. Ever. That never happens.
Well, the experiment
requires that you continue.
What about in dangerous severe shock, and then the XXX?
Well,
please continue. Just continue the experiment. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
The participant here deferring to the professor,
Yes.
and that deferring to the professor carries with it a diffusion of responsibility. The responsibility for this is not entirely hers, so much as it is to the authority figure that resides with her in the room.
We're on danger now,
Yeah.
but you say it won't be really dangerous to him.
There's no lasting tissue damage.
Okay. And he signed his form and everything, didn't he? He signed his form and everything, didn't he, to say he was okay with
yes.
it? Okay. Okay. Paper A cup, B wall.
It was scary goat.
Yeah, that's what somebody said in chat is true. There's a recorded line in this where the guy and the other guy will complain. He'll say something like, "Oh, stop! I have a heart condition. I feel like," well, like they say something like that.
It's incorrect. 225 volts.
Stop! Let me out of here! Let me out of here! Let me out!
Number 3.
I mean, it's a classic example of what Milgram showed. Somebody who, at face value, poses no threat to anybody, can, in these kinds of circumstances, proceed to the point of inflicting severe levels of pain.
Is it A cup, B wall, C aeroplane, or D lampshade?
You have to treat the absence of response as a wrong answer and just continue the procedure.
Okay, no response is wrong answer. 390 volts.
No sound.
So now he's gone silent. So after the
Number 4.
protest from the learner in the other room, the idea is now that the learner goes silent, so potentially there is the idea that these shocks have actually either rendered the learner unconscious or possibly even killed them.
C chain or D bicycle. We killed him.
He was not responding, so that it counts as a wrong answer.
Okay. And wrong answer again. 405 volts.
Incorrect, 225.
Stop! Let me out of here! Let me out of here! Let me out!
I'm really not sure if I'm happy to continue doing this with him. He really sounds like he's in a lot of pain.
Well, the experiment requires that you go on.
Yeah, I know, but I don't really take any pleasure in putting that through a human being's arm.
No, but this is an experiment. It's essential that you continue.
Where did I get to? Number 3.
Interesting.
Very interesting. He was all for chucking it in, but...
Yeah, the prompts drove him back to the task. I think it was interesting that that second prompt talks about how essential it is for him to continue. It's essential that you continue.
Oh, these guys talk about it, this shit.
I think that draws on that sense of obligation to the wider scientific project.
Because a scientist doesn't have any coercive power, can't force you to do anything.
Well, I think that's interesting about how this paradigm works and why this paradigm works, is that the influence is ideological. It's about what they believe science to be, that science is a positive product. It produces beneficial findings and knowledge for society that are helpful to society. So there's that sense of science as providing some kind of system for good.
But is the power of authority and the belief that the scientific experiment is being conducted for the greater good enough to persuade the participants to go all the way to the end and deliver the fatal 450-volt shock?
You want me to carry on?
Yes, please continue.
Do we have to do this?
The experiment requires that you continue.
Yeah, I'm going to have to treat that as an incorrect answer, and it's 450 volts.
Thank you.
No answer incorrect, 450 volts.
That is incorrect. I have to give you 450 volts.
450 volts. 450 volts.
9 out of the 12 participants went all the way to the end.
450 volts.
In Milgram's original experiment, the majority, over 65% of people,
I was over 65.
50 volts.
That's it. You've gone to the end of the experiment. Thank you very much.
Immediately afterwards, the subjects are told the true nature of the experiment. The majority, over 65% of people.
I was over. Oh fuck.
Hi, I'm Tom, from the same ship.
What now? How shall we escape?
I'm afraid that might take some time.
Hold me.
No Red Bull, no wings.
Wow, that was rape culture as fuck.
I should tell you that you've not been producing any shocks for the learner. You haven't been administering any shocks.
Oh, haven't I?
No.
But where's he gone?
He's coming around here now.
I'm all right. Nothing wrong with me at all.
I realised when you went silent you're either dead or you weren't actually plugged into it anymore.
Hello.
I'm Michael Portillo.
Hello.
How do you do?
Hi.
Do you mind if we ask you some questions?
No, of course not. No.
You looked as if you were under some stress.
Oh, did you see me?
I could see you.
Where were you?
There's a camera in there.
Okay.
You looked as if you were under some stress,
I found it quite stressful, yeah. Yeah, I did.
but you went on.
I did, yeah. Because the man behind me said that it wasn't going to damage him long term, so...
So if by chance you had hurt Nick, whose responsibility would that have been?
Well, in the eyes of the law, it would have been my fault, and morally, it would have been my fault. I could have argued that I was following a procedure laid out for an experiment, and perhaps tried to blame science, but in reality, it would have been me pressing buttons.
And even with the burden of the knowledge that morally you might have been responsible for a man's death, you went on.
Not entirely pleased about that, but I did, yeah.
How did you interpret Nick's silence after about 370 volts?
I don't know. I didn't actually properly think about it. Probably, maybe I probably should have, but I didn't think about it that much. So my job was to read the list. So.
See, the man taking responsibility, but see, that's the thing, Bigelow. These interviews afterwards are actually like a whole different thing. This is like the interview afterwards is like the 20/20 hindsight kicking in, because even though that guy gave that, like, it's funny because after what they just asked that guy, he gave like, what would you say in a classroom setting? Like, oh well, that would be morally dubious. Like, I could never carry through to the very final shock. Like, the responsibility would rest solely with me. I would never allow myself to become a slave to an authority figure and kill a man just because. But he went through to the final shock, you know. Like, so even though he can say all of that afterwards, he was in a position where the figure of authority didn't even have to use force, right? The guy wasn't even threatening him with anything. Like, if the guy walked out of the experiment, then whatever, maybe they get paid a cash stipend that he would have to sacrifice. But even though the guy had the correct answer, like on paper in a classroom, when it actually came time to do the experiment, he went all the way to the final shock, you know?
The whole thing.
Philip was one of the 3 who refused to complete the test.
But you were involved in an important scientific experiment, and the professor was telling you to go on. Why did you disobey?
It sounds a little bit like the Nazis in Second World War Germany. It wasn't me, Gov. You know, it was I was told to do it.
The majority of people go all the way.
That's scary.
To 450 volts.
I find that scary.
This has been an extraordinary experience for me. It's absolutely justified.
The Stanford prison experiment I thought was really interesting too. Although I've read some things. I've read that some people now call into question the legitimacy of that Stanford prison experiment, saying that there might have been too much outside influence for it to be there might have been too much outside influence for it to be. Oh yeah, I guess you can. The Wikipedia article probably has a ton of info for the criticism. I don't know how many times this. I don't think anybody else replicated this experiment. Was it done anymore else? I don't think it was. I could be wrong though. But yeah, it's really hard to do. Yeah, like scientific method, and that it was a lot of people criticized the results of this experiment because of different things of the scientific method that were harder to follow. This experiment is a replication of another one? Which one? I don't remember that. Or I mean, I'm not saying you're wrong, but almost no one considers it valid. I don't know if that was true that no one considers it valid. I think that it was just that, I don't think it's so much, it's like, there's like a fine line. It's not that people would say this experiment isn't valid at all. They would say like, take the conclusions with a heavy grain of salt, right? I think is what they would say. Like the Stanford prison experiment is very interesting to read about, and you wouldn't be wasted to like watch a video on it or to read or study about it. But the conclusions have to be taken, you have to be very knowledgeable that a lot of things might not necessarily follow because of other influences during this. I don't think that you would just say that it's completely invalid, you know? To be honest, after reading the criticism of Milgram experiment on Wikipedia, I don't like it. The participants were repeatedly told no harm is given, which doesn't correspond well to obedience to military Nazis. But HXC0, you actually could, because when you're in the military, like you spend a lot of time like dehumanizing like the opponent, right? You dehumanizing whoever you're fighting against, right? Like, and it's part of that process where like they might not necessarily say you're not doing harm, but they might say like, oh well, like this is the enemy, or like what you're doing is right, or you know this isn't bad, nothing bad is coming from this, you know. Even you could even extend it to religious things like, well, this is what God would want, or this is like, you know, this is the way of the world, or this is what you have to do in order for it to be, you know, morally right, or, you know, divinely right. This is why I do not condone experiments that have yet to be replicated. One of the cardinal sins of scientific experiments is not being able to replicate in any given environment. It is like saying it's okay for laws of nature to only apply in certain circumstances. Sure, Adeline, but the problem with psychology is that it's really, really hard. This is why some people, I don't necessarily agree with this, but a lot of people, especially STEM fucks, who are retarded as fuck, a lot of people will say things like, oh, well, psychology is not a real science because you can't replicate the experiments, which is, to be fair, is the cornerstone of all of science, right? Replicating experiments is probably the #1 most important tenet of any science ever, right? Because if you can't replicate something, then it's worthless. But if it can be replicated enough, then it becomes a scientific law, you know, and then you try to understand it and all that shit. But but psychology is really difficult to do that because a lot of experiments would be immoral or unethical. Not to mention that psychology, the study of the mind, is already like very fucking confusing and difficult to do because of all the different controls and shit that you need, and like all the variations and all of the confounding fucking variables and permutations of a person's fucking mind and everything. Like, so I mean, yeah, I mean, I wouldn't just like write it all off and say like, oh, well, this is fucking bullshit, like, because you can't replicate the experiment. I mean, if you want to say that, you can, but I feel like you could draw parallels, even though it isn't exactly true. Like, how many times, somebody can answer me, I'm a really bad person of history. History and geography are my worst fucking things, I'm not even joking. But how many times in history has there been some awful, terrible fucking shit going on, and then everybody stood up and was like, hey, stop doing this is really bad? Like, how many times in history has that ever happened? To be honest, Shadow09, the things that I've seen of neuroscience make neuroscience look way more pseudoscience than psychology. I'm not gonna lie. Like, my opinion right now is that psychology is a much more valid science than neuroscience, just because I've seen a lot of really quacky random shit come out of like neuroscientific people. But I might be like, maybe I'm wrong. Like, Zimbardo, this guy's the guy that wrote my textbook that I used in psychology. I really liked this guy's textbook. This guy probably, of all the textbooks that I ever read for any class ever, this guy's was definitely my favorite. I think this is one of the only textbooks I read where he actually, in the textbook, he mentions it in the prologue, he actually cites sources for everything that he says, which is interesting. And this is a high school it was AP Psych, so does that count as a high school or a college textbook? I don't know. It might have been a college textbook that we used for the class. But he actually cites references to everything that he says, which I thought was really cool at the time, because we always had to do it for our papers, but textbooks never had to cite anything, you know? I thought that was cool. We won't watch all this, but this guy is like, this is a really cool dude. The Zimbardo guy, I think everything I've ever seen about him talking is very, very interesting. But the reason why I bring that up is because the reason why I bring that up is because it seems like there's all sorts of horrible fucking shit that's gone on through all of history. And I don't remember any times where it's like, well, this group of people was totally dehumanizing this other group of people, and then everybody stood up because they realized it was wrong. Like, I never heard of that happening, you know? Like, the mass fucking killings, the Salem witch trials we talked about earlier, people burning people to stakes, murdering and slaughtering all of the Native Americans, you know, the fucking Holocaust shit, you know, all the soldiers required to make that work, I don't know, like slavery and all across the world, really. I could say the United States because that's what I'm most familiar with. Like all of these horrible things where all these horrible fucking things are happening. It seems like it takes a lot of work to get people to stand up and say like, okay, well, hey, this isn't wrong, you know? Do you feel like evil is a really strong word that should only be used sparingly, or do you think it could apply to a lot of people? I think that the word evil is really overrated. Honestly, like, I think that, I don't know, I become like I view things a lot more deterministically. Didn't people literally not know the Holocaust was going on? Like, as bad as it was anyway? Well, I mean, all the soldiers and shit involved knew. A lot of the Western world apparently didn't know. I think that Americans walking into the camps for the first time were very surprised when they got there. But I don't know if that's because people were willfully ignorant or they didn't believe the rumors. I'm not entirely sure. From my poor understanding of history, the Western world didn't know that the Holocaust was actually going on. But I mean, all the soldiers and shit in Germany involved probably knew what was going on. But I mean, I don't know. Did The Wire have a strong effect on you? The Wire reinforced a lot of stuff that I'd kind of been leaning towards anyway. Like, I was a lot more individualistic 5 years ago, or even 3 or 4 years ago. I was a very individualistic person. And then I started to shift more towards, okay, well, people are probably function more as classes than individuals the majority of the time. And watching The Wire kind of reinforced a lot of that, I think.